The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Olivia Harker clutched her whimpering 3-year-old daughter Emma to her chest, scanning the dusty main street of Silver Reef, Utah Territory. Her threadbare dress was stained with the grime of 2 days' travel, and the harsh June heat of 1878 had left her lips cracked and bleeding. The stagecoach that had deposited them here had long since disappeared in a cloud of dust, taking with it her last hope of reaching California. "Hush now, Emma," Olivia whispered, brushing back a lock of her daughter's sandy blonde hair. "Mama will figure something out." But the hollow promise rang false even to her own ears. With only 37 cents in her pocket and the small cloth sack containing their meager belongings, Olivia knew they wouldn't survive another night without shelter. Silver Reef had sprung up just 3 years prior, when silver had been discovered in the sandstone, bringing miners, merchants, and the usual assortment of saloon keepers and ladies of the night. The main street teemed with activity despite the late-hour piano music spilled from the saloon doors. Miners stumbled between establishments, and working girls called from balconies. No place for a woman alone with a child. The bitter memory of her husband James' face twisted in rage flashed through Olivia's mind. The bruises on her arms had faded, but the fear remained. She had fled their small farm outside St. Louis in the dead of night after he'd come home drunk and taken his frustrations out on her once again. When he'd raised his hand toward Emma, something inside Olivia had snapped. She'd waited until he passed out, gathered what little she could carry, and disappeared. "Excuse me, madam." The deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Olivia spun around, instinctively backing away from the tall figure that had approached silently behind her. The man raised his hands in a placating gesture, his face partially obscured by the brim of his worn leather hat. "Don't mean to frighten you. Just noticed you've been standing here a spell with your little one. Town ain't safe after dark." In the fading light, Olivia could make out a weathered face with kind eyes and a strong jawline softened by several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were dusty, but well kept: a simple cotton shirt under a leather vest, denim trousers, and boots that had seen many miles. A gun belt hung at his hip, but he made no move toward the weapon. "We're fine," Olivia lied, shifting Emma to her other hip. The child buried her face in her mother's neck, exhausted and hungry. "Pardon my saying so, but you don't look fine," the man replied, his voice gentle. "Name's Frederick Northcott. Folk round here call me Fred. I run the Double N Ranch about 5 miles outside town." "Olivia Harker," she replied cautiously, "and my daughter, Emma. Pleased to meet you both. You got somewhere to stay tonight, Mrs. Harker?" Olivia hesitated. Experience had taught her to be wary of men offering help, but Emma's weight in her arms was growing heavier by the minute, and the child's stomach had been growling for hours. "We'll manage," she said, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Frederick Northcott studied her face, taking in the fear and exhaustion written there. He glanced at the small sack of belongings at her feet, then at the child clinging to her mother. "If you don't mind my asking, where were you headed?" "California," Olivia admitted after a moment. "But the stagecoach fare ran out. I thought I could find work here until I saved enough to continue west." Frederick nodded slowly. "Silver Reef's no place for a lady and child alone. Only work for women here is washing clothes, cooking at the boarding house, or—" He trailed off, his eyes flicking toward the saloon. Olivia's cheeks burned. "I'll take honest work, Mr. Northcott, any kind." "I believe you would," he replied, a hint of respect in his voice. "But fact remains, you need a safe place tonight." He seemed to wrestle with a thought before continuing. "I've got a wagon out front of the general store, was about to head back to my ranch, got a spare room with a decent bed." Olivia took a step back, clutching Emma tighter. Noticing her reaction, Frederick quickly added, "My sister Martha lives with me, helps with the cooking and such. You'd be under her watch, not mine. I give you my word as a gentleman." "Why would you help strangers?" Olivia asked, suspicion edging her voice. Frederick removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair with strands of silver at the temples. He looked to be in his early 30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested more laughter than hardship. My ma came west with nothing but me and a suitcase when I was about your little one's age, he said quietly. If not for the kindness of strangers, we wouldn't have survived the first winter. He replaced his hat and looked her in the eye. You had nowhere to go with your child, Mrs. Harker. I'm offering you a temporary solution, nothing more. Emma whimpered again, and Olivia could feel her daughter's ribs through her thin dress. Pride wouldn't feed her child or keep the night chill away. Then you'll go home with me, Frederick said, his voice firm but gentle. It wasn't a question this time, but an assurance, a promise of safety. Something in his steady gaze made Olivia believe him. With a small nod, she gathered her sack and followed him down the street toward the general store where a wagon waited, pulled by two sturdy horses. Frederick helped them into the wagon bed, which he had lined with clean straw and a blanket. As they pulled away from Silver Reef, Olivia felt both terror and relief washing over her in equal measure. She didn't know this man, yet she was placing her fate and her daughter's in his hands. The wagon rocked gently as they traveled through the desert landscape, bathed in the silver glow of a rising moon. Emma finally succumbed to exhaustion, her small body going limp against Olivia's chest. She'll be all right, Frederick said, noticing Olivia's concern as she cradled her sleeping daughter. Children are resilient. She's all I have, Olivia whispered. Frederick's eyes remained on the path ahead, but his voice was soft when he replied, Sometimes all we need is all we have. The words settled between them as the wagon continued through the night, the steady clip-clop of hooves marking their journey toward an uncertain future. The Double N Ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest but well-maintained single-story house with a broad porch, flanked by a barn and several outbuildings. Light glowed from the windows, and smoke curled from the stone chimney. Home, Frederick announced, pulling the wagon to a stop. Not fancy, but it keeps the rain out and the warmth in. Before Olivia could respond, the front door swung open and a woman stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Frederick Northcott, you're late for supper again, she called, her tone scolding but affectionate. She paused when she spotted Olivia and Emma in the wagon. And you've brought company, Martha, this is Mrs. Olivia Harker and her daughter Emma, Frederick explained as he helped Olivia down from the wagon. They need a place to stay for a spell. Martha Northcott was a sturdy woman in her early 40s with the same kind eyes as her brother, though her face showed more worry lines than laugh lines. Her brown hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a practical bun. She gave Olivia an appraising look before her expression softened at the sight of the sleeping child. Well, don't just stand there in the dark, Martha said, ushering them toward the house. That child needs a proper bed, and you look like you could use a hot meal yourself. Inside, the ranch house was simple but comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with worn but clean furniture arranged around it. The smell of beef stew and fresh bread filled the air, making Olivia's stomach growl audibly. The spare room's just down that hall, Martha said, pointing. Why don't you put your little one to bed and then come back for some supper? I'll heat some water for washing up if you'd like. Olivia followed Martha's directions to a small but tidy bedroom with a double bed covered in a patchwork quilt. She gently laid Emma down, removing only her shoes before tucking her beneath the covers. The child stirred briefly, mumbling something in her sleep, then settled again. When Olivia returned to the main room, Frederick had removed his hat and gun belt and was washing his hands at a basin near the door. Martha was ladling stew into bowls at the wooden table. Come sit, Mrs. Harker, Martha called. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days. Olivia sank into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the simple kindness. Thank you, she managed, her voice thick with emotion, and please call me Olivia. As they ate, Frederick asked few questions, seeming to sense her reluctance to speak of her past. Instead, he told her about the ranch, how his father had started it 20 years ago, how he'd taken over after his parents passed, and how Martha had come to live with him after losing her husband to typhoid 3 years prior. We run about 60 head of cattle, he explained. Not the biggest spread, but enough to get by. Got a good hand working for me, Juan Vasquez. Been with the ranch since Pa's time, lives in the small cabin out back with his wife Alina. Fred's being modest, Martha interjected. The double N has the best breeding stock in the territory. He could have 3 times the cattle if he wanted, but he's particular about quality over quantity. Frederick's ears reddened slightly at his sister's praise. Just trying to do right by what Pa built. After the meal, Martha showed Olivia where to wash up and provided a clean nightgown that was slightly too large but blessedly soft against her skin. It was mine, Martha explained. Never had much use for frills, but a woman should have something decent to sleep in. As Olivia slid into bed beside her daughter that night, she felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. She was still a stranger in this house, still running from a past that threatened to catch up with her. But for the first time in months, she felt safe enough to close her eyes without fear. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Emma's delighted giggles. For a moment, panic gripped her where was her daughter, until she heard Martha's warm laugh joining Emma's. Olivia dressed quickly in her travel-worn clothes and followed the sounds to the kitchen, where she found Emma sitting at the table with a cup of milk and a plate of hot cakes while Martha cooked at the stove. Frederick was nowhere to be seen. "Good morning," Martha greeted her. "Your little one's been helping me feed the chickens. She's quite the farmhand already." "Mama," Emma exclaimed, her face lighting up. "Miss Martha has chickens and they say cluck cluck and I got to throw them corn." It was the most animated Olivia had seen her daughter in weeks, and the sight brought tears to her eyes. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Fred's out checking the north pasture," Martha explained as she set a plate of hot cakes before Olivia. "He said to tell you to make yourself at home and that he'd speak with you about work when he returns this afternoon." "Work?" Olivia asked, surprised. "Well, you did say you were looking for honest work, didn't you?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "Fred mentioned you might be staying on for a while, helping around the ranch, unless you're still set on California," Olivia hesitated. The plan to reach California had been born of desperation, not desire. She'd simply needed to get as far from St. Louis and James as possible. I suppose I could stay if there's truly work to be done." "Oh, there's always work on a ranch," Martha assured her. "And between you and me, I could use another woman's company. It gets lonely out here with just Fred and Juan to talk to." After breakfast, Martha showed Olivia around the ranch. Besides the main house, barn, and Juan's cabin, there was a chicken coop, a small vegetable garden, a workshop where Frederick repaired equipment, and corrals for the horses and cattle. Elena Vasquez emerged from the cabin as they passed, a petite woman with a warm smile who immediately took to Emma, speaking to her in a mixture of English and Spanish that delighted the child. "Elena helps with washing and mending," Martha explained. "Juan's been teaching Fred's new colts. They've known each other since they were boys." By midday, Olivia had helped Martha with the washing and learned that the ranch was largely self-sufficient. They grew most of their own vegetables, preserved fruits and meat for winter, and traded with neighbors for what they couldn't produce themselves. When Frederick returned in the late afternoon, dust-covered and weary, he found Olivia in the kitchen helping Martha prepare dinner. His expression brightened at the sight of her, though he quickly masked it with a polite nod. "Mrs. Harker," he greeted her. "I hope you and Emma rested well." "Very well, thank you," Olivia replied, "and Martha mentioned you might have work for me." Frederick washed his hands at the basin before answering. "I do, if you're willing. Nothing too taxing to start helping Martha with the cooking and cleaning, tending the garden, maybe learning to make cheese and butter." "I grew up on a farm in Missouri," Olivia told him. "I know about gardening and preserving, and I can cook well enough." "Good, good," Frederick nodded, seeming pleased. "As for payment, I can offer room and board for you and your daughter, plus $10 a month." It wasn't much, but it was fair for a woman's work in the territory, and the security of a roof over their heads was worth more than money to Olivia right now. "That's generous, Mr. Northcott. Thank you." "Fred," he corrected her with a small smile. "If you're going to be living here, might as well use my name." Over dinner, Frederick talked more about the ranch, his plans for expanding the herd, and the challenges of ranching in Utah territory. Olivia found herself drawn into the conversation, offering suggestions from her own experience that Frederick received with genuine interest. That night, as she tucked Emma into bed, Her daughter looked up with wide blue eyes. "I like it here, Mama. Can we stay forever?" Olivia smoothed back her daughter's hair, her heart aching with love and uncertainty. "We'll stay as long as we can, sweetheart. Now sleep tight." The days settled into a rhythm at the Double N Ranch. Olivia rose early each morning to help with breakfast and the morning chores. She learned to separate cream from milk, to churn butter, to feed the chickens and collect eggs. Emma followed her like a shadow, absorbing everything around her with a child's curiosity and resilience. Frederick was often gone during daylight hours, tending to cattle or riding the boundaries of his land. When he returned each evening, dusty and tired, he'd always take time to speak with Olivia about her day and tell Emma a story before bed. 2 weeks after their arrival, Frederick mentioned at dinner that he needed to ride into Silver Reef the next day for supplies. "Would you and Emma like to come along?" he asked Olivia. "Might do you good to get off the ranch for a spell." Olivia's first instinct was to decline. Silver Reef meant people questions, the possibility of word somehow reaching James. But Emma had been confined to the ranch, and a child needed more stimulation than chickens and vegetable gardens. "We'd like that," she said finally. "Thank you." The next morning, they set out in the wagon, Emma sitting between Olivia and Frederick on the bench seat, chattering excitedly about the journey. Frederick had given her a small cloth doll that Martha had made, and she clutched it tightly as they traveled. "I thought she might like a toy," Frederick explained when he saw Olivia's questioning look. "Every child should have something to call their own." The simple gesture touched Olivia deeply. James had never considered Emma's happiness, viewing her as merely an extension of his property. Like the farm animals, in Silver Reef, the streets were busy with miners, merchants, and the occasional family. Frederick helped Olivia and Emma down from the wagon and led them to the general store. "Mr. Northcott," the shopkeeper called when they entered, "been wondering when you'd show up." His eyes landed on Olivia and Emma with undisguised curiosity. "And who might these ladies be?" "Samuel, this is Mrs. Harker and her daughter Emma," Frederick said smoothly. "They're staying at the ranch. Mrs. Harker's helping Martha with the house." Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded politely. "Pleasure to meet you, madam. Any friend of the Northcotts is welcome here." As Frederick discussed his order with Samuel, Olivia browsed the store shelves, aware of the occasional glances from other customers. Small towns thrived on gossip, and a single woman with a child living at a bachelor's ranch would certainly provide fodder for talk. "Mama, look." Emma tugged at her skirt, pointing to a display of hard candies. "Not today, sweetheart," Olivia said gently, knowing that even the smallest luxuries were beyond their means. "Get her one," Frederick said quietly, appearing at her side. "My treat." Before Olivia could protest, he had purchased a small paper twist of candy and handed it to Emma, whose face lit up with delight. "What do we say, Emma?" Olivia prompted. "Thank you, Mr. Fred," Emma exclaimed, carefully selecting a piece of candy and popping it into her mouth. Frederick's expression softened as he watched the child's enjoyment. "You're very welcome, Miss Emma." As they left the store, a woman in an elegant dress approached them, her curious gaze fixed on Olivia. "Frederick Northcott, you've been hiding away at that ranch of yours for too long," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "And now I see why. Won't you introduce me to your friend?" Frederick's posture stiffened slightly. "Mrs. Harker, this is Miss Penelope Wilson, daughter of the bank owner." Miss Wilson, Mrs. Olivia Harker and her daughter Emma. Penelope's smile didn't reach her eyes as she assessed Olivia's simple dress and Emma's hand clutching her mother's skirt. "How lovely. And where is Mr. Harker, if I may ask?" Olivia felt her chest tighten. "He's not with us anymore." "Such a pity," Penelope replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "And how fortunate that you found a position at the Northcott Ranch. Frederick has always been so charitable." "Mrs. Harker's help has been invaluable," Frederick cut in, his voice firm. "Now if you'll excuse us, we have more errands to complete." As they walked away, Olivia could feel Penelope's gaze burning into her back. "I'm sorry if I've caused you embarrassment," she said quietly to Frederick. "Nonsense," he replied, guiding them toward the wagon. "Penelope Wilson has been trying to secure a proposal from me for 2 years. Her father owns half the businesses in town, and she thinks she's entitled to the other half. She's very beautiful, Olivia observed. Frederick snorted. Beauty isn't just what's on the surface, Mrs. Harker. I learned that lesson early. They completed their errands in companionable silence, Frederick introducing Olivia to the townspeople they encountered with simple dignity. By the time they headed back to the ranch, Olivia felt both exhausted and strangely exhilarated by the day's interactions. Emma fell asleep on the return journey, her head resting against Frederick's arm. He didn't seem to mind, carefully maintaining the wagon's steady pace to avoid waking her. "Thank you," Olivia said as the ranch came into view. "For today, for everything." Frederick glanced at her, the setting sun casting golden light across his features. "No need for thanks between friends, Mrs. Harker. Friends." The word warmed her, even as she reminded herself that friendship was all it could ever be. Her marriage to James might have been a nightmare, but in the eyes of God and the law, she was still a married woman. As summer progressed into autumn, Olivia found herself settling deeper into life at the Double N Ranch. Her hands grew calloused from work, her skin tanned by the sun. Emma thrived in the open air and freedom, growing stronger and more talkative each day. Frederick proved to be a fair employer and a kind friend. He never asked about her past, though sometimes she caught him watching her with questions in his eyes. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch after Emma was asleep, talking about books they'd read or sharing stories of their childhoods, the safe parts, at least. Olivia learned that Frederick had been only 4 when his father brought the family west from Kentucky, that his mother had taught him to read by lantern light, and that he'd taken over the ranch at 20 when his father's heart gave out during a cattle drive. "Martha says I work too hard," he admitted one evening as they watched the stars emerge. "Maybe she's right, but there's something about building something with your own hands, watching it grow and thrive." "I understand," Olivia said softly. "There's pride in creation, in nurturing life." Frederick turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "You're good with Emma, patient even when she's testing boundaries. My mother was like that with me. She sounds like a wonderful woman." "She was," Frederick agreed, a note of sadness in his voice. "She would have liked you." The comment lingered between them, weighted with something Olivia wasn't ready to examine too closely. October brought the cattle roundup, a time of intense activity as Frederick, Juan, and 2 hired hands gathered the herd for sorting, branding the new calves, and selecting which animals would be sold before winter. Olivia found herself rising before dawn to help Martha prepare enormous breakfasts and pack lunches for the men. They worked late into the evenings, preserving food for winter, canning vegetables from the garden, smoking meat, and storing root vegetables in the cool cellar beneath the house. One evening, as Olivia was returning from hanging laundry, she heard Emma's delighted laughter coming from the barn. Curious, she followed the sound and found Frederick sitting on a hay bale with Emma on his knee, teaching her how to braid leather strips into a small bracelet. "See, you go over, then under, just like that," he was saying, his large hands gently guiding her tiny fingers. "I'm making it for Mama," Emma announced proudly when she spotted Olivia in the doorway. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, moving closer to examine her daughter's handiwork. Frederick looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and something passed between them, a shared moment of simple joy that felt dangerously close to family. "You have a natural teacher's patience," Olivia said to break the tension. "Emma makes it easy," he replied, helping the child slide off his knee. "She's a quick study, just like her mother." That night, as Olivia lay in bed, she touched the rough leather bracelet Emma had proudly presented to her. 4 months ago, they had arrived at the Double N with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a desperate need for sanctuary. Now they had a routine, security, almost a home, and Frederick's solid, dependable Frederick was becoming something more than an employer, more than a friend. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. The first snow fell in early November, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white that enchanted Emma. Frederick built her a small sled from wooden boards and pulled her around the yard, her squeals of delight echoing across the silent landscape. Watching from the porch, Olivia felt a pang of guilt. Emma was beginning to look at Frederick as a father figure, something the child had never really had. James had shown no interest in his daughter beyond annoyance when she cried or made too much noise. But what would happen when Olivia and Emma eventually moved on? The pain of that separation would hurt Emma deeply. "He's good with her," Martha said, joining Olivia on the porch with 2 cups of hot coffee. "Too good," Olivia murmured, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I worry she's becoming too attached." Martha's shrewd eyes studied her face. "And what about you, Olivia? Are you becoming too attached as well?" Olivia felt heat rising to her cheeks despite the cold air. "I'm married, Martha," the older woman sighed. "You've never spoken of your husband, but I've seen the fear in your eyes when strangers come to the ranch. I've noticed how you flinch sometimes when a man raises his voice or moves too quickly." She paused, her expression gentle. "I also know my brother is half in love with you, though he'd never admit it." "Martha, you don't have to explain," Martha interrupted. "Everyone has secrets they're entitled to keep, but remember this. Sometimes what we're running from isn't as strong as what we might be running toward." Before Olivia could respond, Emma came bounding up the steps, her cheeks rosy with cold and excitement. "Mama, Mr. Fred says we can build a snow fort tomorrow if the snow stays." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," Olivia replied, forcing a smile. "Now let's get you inside and warmed up." As she helped Emma remove her wet mittens and boots, Olivia glanced out the window to where Frederick was storing the sled against the side of the house. He moved with the easy strength she had come to admire, his breath visible in the cold air. What was she doing, allowing herself to develop feelings for this man? Her husband was alive, probably looking for them. If James found them, his rage would be terrible not just toward her, but toward anyone who had helped her. She couldn't bring that danger to Frederick's door, not after all his kindness. That night, after Emma was asleep, Olivia sat at the small desk in their room and began a letter. It took her 3 attempts before she was satisfied. "Dear Frederick, Emma and I have imposed on your hospitality for too long. While we are grateful for the shelter and work you have provided, I believe it's time for us to move on. The winter months will be hard enough without extra mouths to feed. We will depart on next week's stage coach to California, as was my original plan. Please know that your kindness will never be forgotten. With deepest gratitude, Olivia Harker." She sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the mantelpiece where Frederick would see it in the morning. Then she returned to her room and wept silently into her pillow, mourning a future that could never be. When Olivia entered the kitchen the next morning, Frederick was already there, her letter open in his hands, his expression unreadable. "You're leaving," he said simply. "It's for the best," she replied, avoiding his gaze as she stoked the stove. "Is it?" He set the letter down carefully. "Olivia, if I've done something to make you uncomfortable, no," she interrupted quickly. "You've been nothing but kind and generous. It's just, Emma and I can't stay here indefinitely. We need to establish our own lives." Frederick was quiet for a long moment. "I won't stop you if you're determined to go, but I wish you'd tell me the real reason." Olivia's hands trembled as she measured coffee into the pot. "That is the real reason." "No, it isn't." His voice was gentle but firm. "For months I've watched you jump at shadows, seen the fear in your eyes when strangers approach the ranch. Whatever you're running from, Olivia, you don't have to face it alone." Something broke inside her at his words. The weight of secrets, of constant vigilance, suddenly felt too heavy to bear. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "My husband," she whispered. "He's alive. I ran away from him." Frederick pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, close but not touching. "I figured as much. Did he hurt you?" Olivia nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "For years. I endured it because I had nowhere else to go, no family left. But then he started looking at Emma the same way he looked at me when he was angry, and I knew I had to leave." "He won't find you here," Frederick said, his voice hardening. "This is my land, my home. You're safe." "You don't know James," Olivia replied, looking up at last. "He's vindictive, dangerous when drinking. If he found us here, he wouldn't just come for me, he'd hurt anyone who helped me. I can't risk bringing that to your door, not after everything you've done for us." Frederick's jaw tightened. "I can handle myself, Olivia, and I have friends in this territory who would stand with me." "Why would you?" she asked, bewildered by his determination. Why risk yourself for us? His expression softened, vulnerability showing in his eyes. Because in these months, you and Emma have brought life back to this house. Because Emma's laughter reminds me what I'm working for. Because when you smile, I feel like I've accomplished something worthwhile. He paused, taking a deep breath. Because I care for you both more than I should. The confession hung in the air between them, impossible to take back or ignore. Frederick, Olivia began, her voice barely audible. Even if I wanted to stay and God help me, I'm still married in the eyes of the law. There can never be anything between us beyond friendship. There are laws against what your husband did to you too, Frederick pointed out, and there are ways to end a marriage that protects the innocent. Before she could respond, they heard Emma's footsteps in the hallway. Frederick stood quickly, composing his features into a casual expression. Think about it, he said quietly. That's all I ask. Don't decide out of fear. Throughout the day, Olivia turned their conversation over in her mind. The thought of staying, of building a life here, was tempting beyond words. Emma was happier than she'd ever been. And Frederick kind, steady Frederick offered a glimpse of what a true partnership might be like. But James would never simply let her go. He viewed her as his property, and his pride wouldn't allow her to escape unpunished. That evening, as Olivia was helping Martha prepare dinner, they heard the sound of an approaching horse. Frederick went to the door, his hand instinctively moving to the gun belt he'd hung on a peg nearby. Rider coming, he announced, peering out the window. Not anyone I recognize. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Emma, she said urgently, go to our room and stay there until I come get you. But Mama, now Emma, Olivia insisted, her voice sharper than she intended. As Emma reluctantly obeyed, Frederick strapped on his gun belt. Stay inside with Martha, he told Olivia, his expression grave. If there's trouble, take Emma and go out the back door to the barn. Juan's there, he'll help you. Olivia nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. She watched through the window as Frederick stepped onto the porch to meet the unknown rider. The man who dismounted was not James. He was older, heavyset, with a bushy beard and the dusty clothes of a traveler. Relief flooded through Olivia, followed quickly by shame at her paranoia. Can I help you? She heard Frederick ask. Name's Miller, the man replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Running messages for the sheriff in Silver Reef. Got word that might interest you. Frederick invited the man inside, where Martha quickly offered him coffee and a place by the fire. Miller nodded gratefully, his gaze passing over Olivia with mild curiosity before returning to Frederick. Sheriff asked me to spread the word to outlying ranches, Miller explained, warming his hands around the coffee cup. There's been reports of a man asking questions about a woman and child traveling west. Dark hair, blue eyes, little girl about 3 or 4. Name of Harker. Olivia felt the room spin around her. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. What sort of questions? Frederick asked, his voice carefully neutral. Where they might be headed if anyone's seen them. Says he's the husband, looking to be reunited with his family. Miller sipped his coffee. Sheriff thought it sounded odd, the way he was going about it. Man seemed angry, not worried like you'd expect from someone searching for loved ones. When was this? Martha asked, glancing at Olivia with concern. About 3 days ago in Cedar City. Figured he might be making his way through the settlements. Miller finished his coffee and stood. Sheriff just wanted folks to be aware. Said if anyone matching that description is around, they might want to be cautious. After Miller departed with supplies and thanks, a heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Olivia stood frozen, her worst fears confirmed. James was looking for them, getting closer with each passing day. I have to leave, she whispered. Tonight, no, Frederick said firmly. That's exactly what you shouldn't do. Traveling alone with Emma would make you vulnerable. Here you have walls, protection. He'll find us, Olivia insisted, panic rising in her voice. He won't stop until he does. Frederick crossed the room to stand before her, his hands gently grasping her shoulders. Olivia, listen to me. If your husband comes here looking for you, he'll find more than he bargained for. I won't let him hurt you or Emma. Neither will I, Martha declared, her expression unusually fierce. That man has no right to frighten you anymore. Tears filled Olivia's eyes at their determination. You don't understand what he's capable of. Maybe not, Frederick conceded, but I understand what I'm capable of to protect what matters to me. For the next several days, the ranch operated under a state of heightened vigilance. Juan rode the boundaries more frequently, checking for unfamiliar tracks or signs of intruders. Frederick kept his rifle close at hand, and Martha took to carrying a small derringer in her apron pocket. Olivia tried to maintain normalcy for Emma's sake, but the strain showed in the dark circles under her eyes and the way she startled at unexpected sounds. Each night, she lay awake listening for the approach of horses, imagining James's rage when he found her. A week passed with no sign of danger. Then another. As November deepened toward Thanksgiving, Olivia began to hope that perhaps James had lost interest in finding them or had tracked their trail in the wrong direction. Frederick noticed her gradually relaxing and took it as a good sign. "We should celebrate Thanksgiving properly," he suggested one evening as they sat by the fire. "A feast with all the trimmings. Invite the Vasquez family to join us at the main table." "That would be lovely," Olivia agreed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "Emma has never experienced a proper Thanksgiving." "Then it's settled," Martha declared. "I'll start planning the menu tomorrow." The days leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with preparations, baking pies and bread, preparing preserves, and planning the feast. Frederick shot a wild turkey, and Juan contributed a traditional Mexican dish that his mother had taught Alina to make. On Thanksgiving morning, Olivia woke with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. As she helped Emma dress in her best clothes, a simple dress that Martha had altered from one of her own, she allowed herself to imagine a future here at the Double N, surrounded by people who had become like family. The dining table was extended to its full length and covered with Martha's best tablecloth. Dishes of steaming food filled every available space: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, stuffing, cranberry preserves, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, and 3 different kinds of pie cooling on the sideboard. "It looks like a feast fit for royalty," Olivia commented as she helped Martha arrange the last of the dishes. "It's been too long since this house has seen a proper celebration," Martha replied, her eyes twinkling. "Fred's been smiling more these past months than I've seen in years." Before Olivia could respond, a loud knock at the front door startled them both. Frederick, who had been carving the turkey, set down the knife and moved to answer it, his posture tense. "Probably Juan and Alina," Martha said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Olivia followed Frederick into the main room, her heart racing. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette that turned her blood to ice. "James," she whispered. Frederick turned to her, his expression hardening. "Go to the kitchen with Martha. Stay with Emma." "Frederick, please, go," he repeated firmly. "Let me handle this." Trembling, Olivia retreated to the kitchen where Emma sat at the table, blissfully unaware of the danger that had arrived on their doorstep. Martha put a protective arm around Olivia's shoulders. From the main room, they heard the door open and Frederick's deep voice. "Can I help you?" Name's Harker. James Harker. The sound of her husband's voice after so many months made Olivia's knees buckle. "I'm looking for my wife and daughter. Been told they might be in these parts." "No one by that name here," Frederick replied evenly. "Just my sister and me on this ranch." There was a pause, and Olivia could imagine James's skeptical expression, the way his eyes would narrow with suspicion. "Funny thing is, I described them to some folks in town, and they mentioned a woman and child living out at the Northcott ranch." "Town gossip," Frederick dismissed. "I've hired help from time to time. People talk. Mind if I look around?" James's voice had that dangerous edge. Olivia knew too well the tone that preceded violence. "I do mind," Frederick replied, his voice hardening. "This is private property, Mr. Harker. If your family is in the territory, I suggest you continue your search elsewhere." Emma tugged at Olivia's skirt. "Mama, who's that man talking to Mr. Fred?" "SHH, sweetheart," Olivia whispered, placing a finger to her lips. "It's just ranch business." In the main room, the tension was escalating. "See, I think you're lying," James said, his voice rising. "I think my wife is here, hiding from her responsibilities, taking my daughter from her rightful home." "I've asked you politely to leave," Frederick stated, Don't make me ask impolitely. You think I'm afraid of you, rancher, James sneered. I've come too far to be turned away by some self-righteous. The rest of his words were cut off by the sound of a scuffle boots on wooden floors, the crash of furniture, and then a sickening thud. Olivia couldn't bear it any longer. Stay with Emma, she told Martha, and rushed into the main room. The scene that met her eyes was chaos: an overturned chair, a broken lamp, and Frederick pinning James against the wall, one arm pressed against his throat. "Frederick," Olivia cried out. Both men turned at the sound of her voice. James's face twisted with triumph and rage. "I knew it," he spat. "Come to hide behind another man's skirts, have you, Olivia?" Frederick didn't release his hold. "Is this your husband?" he asked her, his voice controlled despite the fury in his eyes. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "She's my wife," James growled. "By law, she belongs with me." "The child, too. You've got no right to keep them here." Frederick's expression darkened. "A man who beats his wife and threatens his child has forfeited any right to them." James's eyes narrowed. "Been telling tales, has she, spinning stories to win your sympathy?" He laughed bitterly. "Olivia's always been clever that way, but at the end of the day, she's still my property and I'm taking her home." "No," Olivia said, finding her voice at last. "I'm never going back with you, James, not ever." "You don't have a choice," James snarled. "Unless your new protector plans to commit murder in front of witnesses." Frederick eased his pressure slightly, allowing James to breathe more freely. "There are laws in this territory, Harker, laws that protect women and children from men like you. Laws that recognize a husband's authority over his household," James countered. "Any judge will side with me." A small voice from the kitchen doorway interrupted them. "Mama!" All eyes turned to see Emma standing there, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Martha stood behind her, looking stricken. "Emma," Olivia breathed, moving instinctively to shield her daughter. James's expression changed at the sight of the child, not softening but calculating. "There's my girl," he said with false warmth. "Come to your pa, Emma." Emma shrank back against Olivia's skirts. "I don't want to," she whispered. The rejection infuriated James. "You see what you've done," he accused Olivia. "Turn my own flesh and blood against me," she remembers, Olivia replied quietly. "Children always remember fear, James." Frederick released James but remained between him and Olivia. "Here's what's going to happen," he said in a voice that brooked no argument. "You're going to leave this ranch today. You're going to sign divorce papers giving Olivia her freedom. And you're going to stay away from her and Emma for the rest of your days," James sneered. "And why would I do any of that? Because if you don't," Frederick continued calmly, "I'll make sure every person in this territory knows what kind of man you really are. The kind who beats women and terrorizes children. The kind no decent household will employ or do business with." "It would be your word against mine," James scoffed. "Actually," Martha interjected, stepping forward, "it would be all our words. Mine, Juan's, Alina's, Sheriff Patterson's in Silver Reef, who, by the way, is dining with us this evening. This territory takes care of its own, Mr. Harker. Olivia and Emma are part of our community now." James looked from one face to another, seeing the determination in their eyes. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. "And if that social pressure isn't persuasive enough," Frederick added, his voice dropping dangerously low, "remember that accidents happen frequently in wild country. Men get lost. Sometimes they're never found." The threat hung in the air, all the more menacing for its quiet delivery. Olivia had never seen this side of Frederick, the steel beneath the gentle exterior. James's bravado faltered. He straightened his jacket with affected dignity. "She's not worth the trouble," he said finally. "The child either, but I want compensation for my property and the inconvenience." "You'll get nothing but your life," Frederick replied coldly. "Consider yourself fortunate for that." For a tense moment, it seemed James might resist further. Then, with a final venomous glare at Olivia, he turned and stalked out of the house. Frederick followed him to ensure he mounted his horse and rode away. When he returned, he found Olivia kneeling on the floor, holding Emma tightly against her chest, tears streaming down her face. "He's gone," Frederick assured her, kneeling beside them, "and he won't be back." "You can't know that," Olivia whispered. "James doesn't give up easily." Neither do I, Frederick replied simply. That evening, despite the earlier disruption, they gathered around the table for Thanksgiving dinner. Sheriff Patterson did indeed join them, along with Juan and Elena Vasquez. No one mentioned the confrontation with James, though the sheriff had been quietly informed. As they passed dishes and shared conversation, Olivia watched Frederick at the head of the table, steady, dependable Frederick, who had stood between her family and harm without hesitation. Emma sat beside him, having insisted on the arrangement, and he occasionally helped her cut her food or answered her whispered questions with patient attention. This is what family should be, Olivia thought. Not fear and control, but protection and kindness. Love expressed through actions rather than mere words. After dinner, when the guests had departed and Emma was tucked into bed, Olivia found Frederick on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. "Thank you," she said quietly, joining him at the railing. "For today, for everything." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said to him, Olivia. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you and Emma safe." "I know," she replied, and realized that she truly did know it deep in her soul. But what happens now? James may have left today, but legally I'm still his wife. Frederick was quiet for a moment, considering. There's a judge in Salt Lake City who grants divorces in cases like yours. It would mean a journey, testimony about what you endured. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be legitimate. "And then what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes met hers, warm and steady in the lantern light. "And then you'd be free to choose your own path. Stay here, go to California, whatever you desire. And if what I desire is to remain here." Olivia's heart pounded as she spoke the words. Frederick's expression softened. "Then nothing would make me happier. This ranch, this home, it's been missing something for a long time. I didn't realize what until you and Emma arrived." He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from work, warm against her skin. "I don't expect anything, Olivia," he said earnestly. "Your friendship alone has been a gift. But if, someday, you might consider something more between us when you're truly free and have had time to heal, I would count myself the most fortunate man in the territory." Olivia looked up at his face. This man who had offered sanctuary when she had nowhere to go, who had treated her daughter with gentle kindness, who had stood between her family and danger without hesitation. "Frederick," she said softly, "I think I began considering something more the moment you said, 'Then you'll go home with me.'" His eyes widened slightly, hope brightening his features. With gentle reverence, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. It was a chaste gesture, respectful of her still married state, but it held the promise of a future neither of them had dared imagine until now. "Then we'll go to Salt Lake City," he said. "We'll get your divorce. And then, when you're ready, not a moment before we'll begin whatever story you wish to write." "A story of home," Olivia whispered. "That's what I want. A true home for Emma, for both of us." Frederick smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight above them. "Then that's what we'll build together." Spring arrived at the Double N Ranch in a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The journey to Salt Lake City in January had been arduous but successful. The judge, moved by Olivia's testimony and the supporting statements from Sheriff Patterson and others, had granted her divorce and full custody of Emma. James Harker had not contested the proceedings, having apparently found the prospect of starting fresh elsewhere more appealing than facing the scrutiny and ostracism his actions had earned him in Utah territory. True to his word, Frederick had been patient, allowing Olivia time to adjust to her newfound freedom. Their courtship unfolded slowly, built on the foundation of friendship and mutual respect they had established over the previous months. Emma, who had already adored Mr. Fred, blossomed under the certainty that neither she nor her mother would ever have to leave the ranch again. On a perfect May morning, with the mountains still capped with snow and the valley bursting with new life, Olivia Harker became Olivia Northcott in a simple ceremony on the ranch. Emma served as flower girl, Martha as matron of honor, and Juan as Frederick's best man. Friends from neighboring ranches and from Silver Reef, gathered to celebrate the union that many had seen coming long before the couple themselves had acknowledged it. "I never thought I'd feel this kind of happiness," Olivia admitted to her new husband as they shared their first dance under lanterns strung across the yard. "For so long, survival was all I dared hope for." Frederick's arms tightened around her waist. "You deserve every happiness, Mrs. Northcott. And I intend to spend the rest of my days ensuring you never doubt that again." From across the yard, Emma's laughter rang out as she danced with Juan's youngest son, her face alight with joy and security, a child who no longer feared the sound of approaching footsteps or raised voices. 5 years later, the Double N Ranch had nearly doubled in size and prosperity. Frederick's careful breeding program had produced cattle sought after throughout the territory, and their expanded gardens and orchards provided abundance for their growing family. Olivia stood on the porch, watching as Frederick taught their 3-year-old son Thomas to ride his first pony, while 8-year-old Emma offered enthusiastic encouragement from the fence. The sight filled her heart with a contentment she had once thought impossible. Martha emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "They're at it again," she observed with a smile. "That boy's going to be just like his father, can't keep him off a horse." "Emma's no better," Olivia laughed. "Frederick says she rides better than half the cowboys in the territory." "She has a good teacher," Martha replied, her voice warm with pride for her brother and the family he had built. As Olivia watched, Frederick lifted Thomas from the pony and set him on solid ground, then turned and caught sight of her on the porch. The smile that spread across his face still made her heart skip a beat, the smile of a man who had found his purpose and joy in the family surrounding him. He crossed the yard to join her, Thomas running ahead on sturdy legs. "Mama, I rode Thunder all by myself," the boy announced proudly. "I saw, sweetheart," Olivia replied, bending to kiss his dark curls. "You're very brave." Frederick climbed the steps and wrapped an arm around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. "He takes after his mother that way," he murmured. "Bravest woman I know." Olivia leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him, the security she had found within his love. "I wasn't brave," she corrected gently. "Just desperate." "Sometimes they're the same thing," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "Desperation pushed you to take a chance on a stranger who offered you shelter. Bravery let you build a new life from the ashes of the old one." Emma called from the corral, demanding her father's attention for some new equestrian feat she wanted to demonstrate. With a quick kiss to Olivia's cheek, Frederick returned to their daughter, his stride easy and confident in the life they had created together. Olivia watched them, her family, her heart, her home. 6 years ago, she had stood on a dusty street with nothing but her child and fear as companions. A kind stranger had looked at her desperate situation and simply said, "Then you'll go home with me." She hadn't known then that home wasn't a place, but a feeling, the feeling of safety, of belonging, of being truly loved. Here on this ranch, surrounded by the family they had built together, Olivia had found more than shelter. She had found the home she had always sought but never believed possible. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting golden light across the land they had nurtured together, Olivia whispered a prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here to this man, this family, this life built on love and second chances, home at last.